Simon Hamilton and Mark Durkan are with me. Simon Hamilton, do you agree that there are holes in the Executive's budget?
Certainly not. Well, it would be churlish to suggest that the Executive, like any government in the world, isn't facing difficult times. You know, there are challenges facing the Northern Ireland Executive, just as there are any government in the world. But I think those difficulties that we're now facing actually underscore the prescience of prioritising economic growth and record levels of investment in our infrastructure right across Northern Ireland. And it's easy in some ways for economists to sit in ivory towers and theorise about what should or shouldn't be done, but it's worth examining what they're actually suggesting. They're suggesting that either one thing that we should do is either cut back on that £1.5 billion worth of investment in our infrastructure this year, which is transforming the way Northern Ireland looks and building new schools, new roads, new hospitals, or we should actually stop from helping people out. And you know, they can talk about water charges or rate relief and so forth, but that is actually putting money into people's pockets and keeping money in businesses' coffers.
But what they'll say is
helping people to get through difficult times.
Yes, they'll argue, though, they're not in the ivory towers, they're in the real world. In fact, you're the ones with your heads in the sand. You're in denial about the realities that you can't either continue to give away and spend at the same time. You've got to decide which is the priority.
Far from it. There's no denial. There are difficult times facing the Northern Ireland Executive. That's absolutely sure. I mean, everybody has admitted that. That is on the record. But what we have to do in the real world is balance between helping businesses, helping people, and continuing to invest in public services and our infrastructure. That's a balance that I believe the Executive is meeting and is facing up to that challenge. And I'm happy to have the electorate to cast their judgment on that rather than economists.
OK. Mark Durkan, I mean, is this something that the Executive can do based on a budget which John Simpson there, one of these economists, said is a fiction?
Well, of course it's a fiction. The fact is the budget was based on a number of presumptions and projections, and most of them have travelled significantly far south. So when that has changed, then obviously budget management needs to change. But no, the Executive is saying, no, we're absolutely changing nothing. We're just sticking with this. We didn't even have a proper budget process in the Assembly this year. The Assembly didn't do its annual job of actually looking at what has been spent, whether the priorities are right, and even looking at budget performance. Because, I mean, even if people say, well, we like the figures in the budget and we don't want to change them, the fact is we're not even delivering on those figures. There was meant to be £1.8 billion of capital investment this year. There will be under £1.4 billion of capital investment. Now, that's a dreadful underperformance in terms of delivery of money that is meant to be going out there, money that is meant to not just deliver key services, but money that is meant to help the economy, not least through the construction sector.
Well, give us a specific of where we're going to see the impact. Simon Hamilton says he wants to stick with the plans as they are. The Executive will deliver, but if you feel that they won't, where are we going to see the impact?
Well, these plans as they are, remember, involve efficiency savings, 3%. Hitting frontline health services. We were told that these efficiency savings would only hit bureaucracy, but they're actually hitting frontline services. Now, frontline services need to be protected, and therefore to protect frontline services we need to find money elsewhere. There is money that can be saved in terms of bureaucracy. I mean, if we look at the Department of Finance and Personnel alone, how many grade 5s are there in that department? There are over 40. Over 40 people at the rank of
How many should there be?
At the rank of Assistant Secretary. Well, there shouldn't be over 40 in one department alone, and that's the department that is meant to be looking.
But we're talking about savings needed on a massive scale.
And commending efficiency to others.
But you're picking easy targets here. I mean, talking about senior civil servants at £80,000 a year. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that we should have 20 instead of 40. 20 times 80,000 isn't going to put a dent in the kind of money that this Executive needs.
Well, if you start repeating that right across the budget. And remember, what we need to do with the budget is actually make sure that we have a proper budget process. We don't. Devolution hasn't actually changed the budget process that we inherited. We need to see a situation where you can look at the budget and you can see what are the budget lines that involve frontline services, what are the ones that hardly involve frontline services at all. Then you know which ones to really scrutinise for further efficiencies. Do we have that method? No. We're told there's nothing we have to do with this budget whatsoever. Okay. We have £100 million a year being lost now to social housing. That's the hole that's in the budget. It's meant to be a priority of the programme for government, the social housing programme, and yet the money isn't there for it. We have to find money elsewhere in the budget, and that's why we're proposing to fundamentally recast the budget and just constantly proof and interrogate the budget. That's what devolution is meant to do. That's what an assembly is meant to do.
OK, well, Simon Hamilton, you know, is it not worth going back at least and looking at this to see how you meet those targets? Do you agree, for instance, that the social housing targets should be met, and that because of the lack of sales in social housing, they can't be met on the current structures?
Well, absolutely. I mean, social housing is a major priority, and that's been recognised by the executive and said as such in the programme for government, and that's why over £900 million is going to be pumped into that over the next coming years. But it's difficult to take lectures, I have to say, from the SDLP on the size of government whenever they were partly responsible for creating the system that we have with 11 government departments and all the additional bureaucracy that delivers. One of the reasons that we didn't have a budget process this year, a separate budget process, additional one, was that there is no extra money there to put into it. And it's easy to say that there is, there should be more money put into priorities here, priorities there. But if you're going to put more money into those priorities, then you're going to have to take it from somewhere else. And that's why we're all about protecting frontline services, because you cannot have a new budget process when there's no new money there without actually harming.
Do you see any targets they've identified?
That's why you need it, because there is no new money. That's why you actually need to have a proper budget process
Mark,
to see, are we spending money where we should be spending it?
Well, Mark, you sit here and you don't tell anybody here where you would take money from. If there is no new money and you want to spend more money, which is what you've said, you haven't outlined to the people today where you would take money from to spend it on other things. So I mean, you can't sit there and criticise if you're not prepared to answer the difficult questions.
You started by having a comprehensive budget process. You don't say, because there's no new money, we won't actually look at the budget.
That
is grossly irresponsible.
You're just going to end up in the same place, and if you're not prepared to take the tough decisions.
Well, we are prepared to take the tough decisions, and we are saying not just that the executive should be doing this, we are saying that the Assembly should be doing its job. There are 108 people paid to be accountable, are paid to scrutinise the budget. The Assembly is meant to be the budget authority, and the Assembly is not even doing its job in terms of looking at the annual budget, saying, are we spending money where we should be spending it? Are we spending it as well as we should be? Are we spending it as well as we should be spending?
Let me ask.
People saying there are no savings to be achieved in any of the government departments. Are we so confident that all the money that has been spent exactly to the amount it should be spent,
okay,
and where it should be spent?
Let him answer that question.
So confident.
Let him answer that question, because the key thing here is, as Victor Hewitt said, was that you can't spend and cut back and give away at the same time. So you've got to decide. So if you're saying the SDLP aren't identifying where the savings will come from, are you willing to sacrifice some of the priorities in order to avoid having to raise revenue again?
This is all about striking a balance, and it certainly is a difficult job, particularly in the circumstances that we find ourselves with. But I don't think there is anything wrong in giving, say, £8 million worth of relief to businesses through business rates, a further £8 million through a small business rates relief scheme to help individuals out to the likes of free prescription charges, which is worth £13 million.
Okay,
this is
but
all
then when Margaret Ritchie comes to you and says, I can't build my social housing this year, do you say, well, fair enough?
Margaret has certainly identified pressures, and that's why she's been given £20 million in additional funding for social housing this year, and has been allowed to reprioritise a further £10 million out of our own budget this year as well. And these are priorities that the executive have set. These are executives that the executive are keen to deliver on, and are working hard to deliver that in the circumstances we find ourselves. There's certainly nothing wrong with spending £1.5 billion worth on infrastructure investment this year. That's up from 1.1 last year and 600 million under devolution.
Given the scale of this, so surely we have to look at bigger targets rather than just senior civil servants.
Yeah, of course we have to. I mean, Simon is saying priorities have been set, and they are not being met, which is why you need to recast the budget to say, what do we need to do to make sure we do meet those targets? Are there some areas of expenditure that we can relax for now and get back to later on?
There's no identification of those areas. There's no identification.
I'm sorry to call time on this.
We have to look at reserves. There are a number of agencies and departments sitting on reserves. We can use those reserves.
You'll have to continue the discussion
soon enough.
at the executive table. Gentlemen, we'll leave it there.